What happens when those sworn to protect the nation mistake one of their deadliest protectors for a threat? This is not just a story, it's a warning, a revelation, and a thrill ride from the first line to the last. Don't forget to hit subscribe for more gripping, edge-of-your-seat stories that blur the line between truth and fiction. The humid Washington, D.C. afternoon carried the scent of hot asphalt and tension as the National Guard patrols swept through the city streets, eyes sharp for threats, nerves raw from weeks of unrest, and orders clear. Stop anything that looked even remotely suspicious before it escalated into chaos. But among the uniformed young men and women, none were prepared for the tall, broad-shouldered black man walking alone in plain clothes, wearing an old hoodie and scuffed boots, his hands tucked deep into his pockets, his gaze straight but calm, every movement of his body controlled like a panther conserving energy before the hunt. Because he wasn't just another civilian braving the tense environment, he was Colonel Marcus Steele, a highly decorated Delta Force commander who had spent the last 2 decades in the shadows, carrying out missions that never made headlines, eliminating threats before they reached American soil, bleeding for a country that often didn't see him as more than the color of his skin. And though he carried no weapon, no insignia, nothing to distinguish him from a tired passerby, his mind was an arsenal and his instincts razor sharp. But the guardsmen only saw what they had been conditioned to see. A tall black man in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so it began, one rookie pointing, muttering into his comm, another tightening his grip on the rifle strap slung across his chest, and Marcus knew instantly without needing to look over his shoulder, he had been made into a target. Yet the irony struck him like a bitter taste in his mouth, because here he was, a commander who had led clandestine raids deep in enemy territory, who had extracted hostages from terrorist camps under the cover of night, now being profiled as a potential criminal on the streets of the capital he had sworn to defend. But Marcus didn't flinch, didn't quicken his step, because experience had taught him that predators, whether foreign or domestic, reacted to fear. So he walked steadily toward the corner store where he planned to grab a bottle of water before his private meeting later that evening, when a booming voice shattered the air. "Sir, stop right there." And it wasn't a request but an order laced with suspicion, followed by the heavy boots of soldiers closing in. And as Marcus halted slowly, raising his hands out of his pockets, he felt the chill of déjà vu, memories of raids in dusty villages overseas where he had barked the same command at men who had looked terrified, men who had sometimes been guilty and sometimes just caught in the wrong place. And now, in a cruel twist of fate, he was on the receiving end of his own profession, but he kept his voice calm, deep, commanding. "What seems to be the problem, soldiers?" Yet the young lieutenant leading the group narrowed his eyes, seeing arrogance where there was confidence, threat where there was discipline, and he gestured for 2 guardsmen to circle Marcus, rifles low but ready, and tension thickened like wet cement, drawing the eyes of passers-by, phones slipping from pockets to record, because this was the age where nothing stayed in the dark, not even the humiliation of a man who had given his life to keep others safe. And Marcus could almost hear his wife's voice in his head warning him not to attract attention today, not when he had a classified debrief to attend that could change the balance of power overseas. But fate had other plans, and as one soldier barked, "Show us some ID." Marcus slowly reached into his wallet, every movement exaggerated to keep them from overreacting, and he handed over a plain driver's license, nothing extraordinary, because his true credentials could never be shown on a street corner. But the young lieutenant wasn't satisfied, suspicion clinging to him like a shadow, and in his radio voice he muttered that the man was uncooperative, possibly dangerous, maybe armed. And Marcus felt his pulse harden, not from fear but from a rising fury he kept buried beneath layers of discipline, because he knew how quickly these situations could spiral into tragedy. One wrong twitch, one overzealous finger on a trigger, and the city would ignite. But then came the first twist. The distant whir of an unmarked SUV pulling up fast, tinted windows, the kind Marcus instantly recognized as government issue, and as the guardsmen stiffened, hands ready, the door flew open and out stepped a man in a tailored suit, his sharp eyes scanning the scene, locking onto Marcus with recognition. And suddenly the air shifted, because this was Deputy Director James Holloway of the Defense Intelligence Agency, a man Marcus had saved in a covert extraction years ago in Afghanistan, though the guardsmen had no idea. And Holloway barked, "Stand down," with the authority of someone who rarely repeated himself. But the lieutenant hesitated, confused, until Holloway strode directly to Marcus, extending his hand. "Good to see you, Colonel." and the color drained from the young soldiers' faces as they realized too late that the man they had treated like a suspect was a Delta Force legend, a ghost in the system whose name was whispered with respect in certain classified halls, and for a moment silence reigned, broken only by the recording phones buzzing with live streams. But Marcus didn't shake Holloway's hand. He kept his gaze steady on the soldiers, his voice low but carrying. Remember this feeling, because the enemy doesn't always wear the face you expect. And then the story should have ended, but it didn't, because as Holloway leaned closer, he whispered urgently, "We've been compromised, Marcus. Someone in the Guard has been feeding intel to hostile networks, and this stop wasn't random," and instantly the world tilted, the confrontation on the street becoming just the opening move in a deeper game, a setup not of prejudice alone but of infiltration, and Marcus knew then that his day was only beginning, for now he would have to uncover not just who in the Guard had tried to expose him, but why, and whether the threat was already deeper inside the nation than anyone had dared imagine.